All right, so in those last few videos, we noticed that the slug field was causing a little bit of havoc for us. So we need to actually solve this by making sure our slugs are, well, they're pretty much unique to any given playlist they're a part of, or just unique in general. So basically, we don't want to have it where we can do season 1 and season 1. Or do we? That is a question that we need to answer. Now, first off, if we just want to make sure that our slugs are always unique, we can pass in the argument of unique being true. This is actually true for any of these fields. This would solve the problems that we were having because it would raise an error saying, hey, season 1 cannot be used again. This has to be unique. But that actually doesn't solve the problem that I'm trying to solve, which is I actually want a unique slug generated for me, right? So the slugs are being generated for me. I want a unique one being generated for me, something like that as well. So that's actually how we want to approach this. I will say there is a meta class that we can add to that is called unique together. So we could also say class meta and unique together, which would allow for me to combine uniqueness with two different fields. So like the title field and the slug field or something along those lines. But again, that's another thing that doesn't really solve the problem for me because I want generated uniqueness, not verifying uniqueness, if you will. Okay, so how do we go about solving this? Well, first and foremost, we look at our receiver functions that are creating these slugs, right? It's the slugify pre-save that's the culprit. That's the problem that's happening. So that's in here. So a quick way to actually solve this would be, first off, check. Let's go ahead and do this like my new slug is equal to slugify of that title. And then I can do QS equals to the instance itself. So whatever the instance class would be. So we'll go ahead and say class equals to instance dot underscore underscore class. And in this case, what we've been using is going to equal to, our playlist class. So then I can actually do QS equals to playlist dot objects dot filter. And we can say the slug is equal to the new slug. And if QS dot exists, well, then, we have an error here. We have that slug already in our database, so we don't want to set this slug up. So this is the concept of what we need to do. We need to solve this problem. So let's go ahead and solve it. I'm going to undo everything I just did in this slugify pre-save, leave it in as it was. So let's go into our database folder in the main configuration file. I'm going to go ahead and make a utils in here. So utils.py. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a random string function. So we're going to go ahead and define get random string. And we'll give it a size of however big we want this random string to be. And then the characters that we want to use. Now, the characters we're going to use is from the string module itself. So we're going to go ahead and do string.ascii, not letters, but lowercase. If we do letters, it gives us uppercase and lowercase. I just need lowercase. And then I'll go ahead and do string.digits. This will give me the digits 0 to 9. So to get a random string from these characters, right? So this ends up being one big chars string. We could actually print out what that would look like, but that would give me literally all the characters that are in there. So what I can do to get a random string or a random choice from there, we can import random and then just quite literally get my random char or character is random dot choice of those characters. Okay. So hopefully you know enough about Python to know that we can also just turn this into a list by doing something like this. So for underscore in range of 0 to size, or simply just size, and that would actually give us an entire list of random choices, and then we can just call a string of dot join to join all of those choices. Okay. So this will now give me a random string. Now we can test this just in Python itself, and we should do that and get random string. And if I call it, it should give me a bunch of different random strings. Okay, so this is actually what I want to append to any given slug that already exists. So that means then I'm going to go ahead and define get unique slug. Now, this is going to have to do something very similar to the receiver, at least have an instance come in, but it's going to look a lot like this. So I'll go ahead and copy this and bring it back in here and say instance. And there we go. Okay, so we now have a way to get or create a slug. I do need to import Slugify, so we'll go ahead and do from Django.utils.text. We're going to import Slugify. Okay, so now that I've got this Slugify function in here and the potential to have a random string, I can also just go ahead and say random string equals to get random string. And then the slug is going to now be that Slugify title plus random str. And that would actually give me a random slug every single time, no matter what. But every once in a while, I might actually want that original slugified string. So how do I actually go about solving this? The other thing is, this randomness is not perfectly random. There is a possibility that we will still get a pre-existing slug in our database. So to do this then, we're going to go ahead and pass in a new slug here. And what we want to do is set that equal to none. And we want this to actually be a recursive function. So it's going to call itself. So when would we actually call itself would be the question here. So to do this, I'm going to get rid of the instance up front, with the exception of title and slug here. So, or rather title. So I'm going to go ahead and now this is still creating the slug for me. This should, instead of saying if slug is none, rather say if new slug is none, then create that new slug for me. Otherwise, the slug is going to be equal to what that new slug is. Okay, so this is going to be that instance slug. So now what we can do is actually test whether or not this is in our database. So to do this for the playlist, for example, we would do qs equals to playlist.objects.filter, and we would say slug equals to slug, right? That's not really that surprising. It's going to take one of these arguments in here, and then we would say if qs.exists, then we want to return this exact same function for this instance. And, well, now what? Well, we would actually want to create a new slug. This is actually where we'll create the new slug, and we'd set it equal to that random string function here. So if new slug is none, then we're going to go ahead and slugify the title. So this is the default, right? So this is the default. This is the first iteration, and this is going to be on recursive iterations. So iterations that call itself, which is what's happening here. So then we would pass in new slug equals to new slug. And this will run until it finds a unique slug based off of this lookup right here. Otherwise, it's going to go ahead and return the original slug or whatever slug it ends up coming up with. Okay, but of course we don't actually want playlist objects. We want any class. So to grab the class, we grab it from the instance itself. So instance dot underscore underscore and then class, or CLASS. And I use capital K class so it doesn't conflict with the Python class at all. So capital K class would give me, playlist or category or any other kind of model class I might use for this. And now this would actually give me this unique value. So with that then, we'll go ahead and say parent equals to none. And we'll go ahead and do a try block and say parent equals to instance.parent. And if there is a parent, we'll just go ahead and set it to the variable of parent. If there's not, there will be none. So then I'll just go ahead and change how my query set lookup is going to be. So we'll say if parent is not none, then my query set is going to take into account that parent class. So it's actually going to end up being smaller. So it'd be parent equals to parent, or rather the parent object, whatever that parent object would be. Otherwise, we'll just use the default class filter. And this one should be smaller than this one, right? So this is the main class. So there will be a little bit bigger of a lookup here in the long run. But this will actually allow me to have that unique slug. Hopefully, we still have to actually implement it to see. But now that we've got this, let's go ahead and try it out. So inside of our receiver function, I'm going to import this utility from utils. So we'll do from.utils, import the get unique slug. And now I'll call this a unique slug presave instead of just presave. So unique slug, or let's say unique slugify presave. This time we'll go ahead and set the instance in here, just like that. Okay. So the other part of this unique slug is we have our random string coming through. That's true, but perhaps we want to actually add in a bigger size to it. So let's go ahead and say size equals to 10, right? So then that means that I would pass in size equals to size here. So whatever that random string would end up being. In fact, I don't actually need to create a random string every single time, only when I'm going to create a new slug. So I'll put that method down there instead of up here. We just don't need it. Okay. So now back into those receivers, we will have that get unique slug here, and then I'll give it a size of 5 this time. And I also want to give it, I potentially might want to have a maximum size, right? So our utility, this slugify call will continuously create new and big slugs potentially. And that's also true with this call right here. It might end up being really, really big. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a max size being, let's say, like 30. That might even be already too big. And then that way, I'm going to go ahead and do slug equals to slug up to whatever that max size is. And doing it here will ensure that no matter what the slug is coming through, it's going to create that one. Cool. So now that we've got this, let's go ahead and implement this unique slugify presave. I'm going to go into my playlists and models. And we're going to, instead of using the slugify presave, we will be using the unique slugify presave on each one of these things. Save it, and we made some changes to our model. So what do? Python manage.py make migrations, and then Python manage.py migrate, and then Python manage.py test and playlists. Hit enter. Cool. Everything ended up working out great. So that means that all of my other tests are working as far as the slugs are concerned. I haven't actually tested or needed to test the actual season name or the uniqueness of the slugs, which is something I probably should implement. So in my TV shows, that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to come in here, and I'm just going to add one more season to this. So we'll go ahead and call this season 11, The Office season 11, but I'll accidentally say season 1. So those should be identical. Okay, so we will have to check that. I just want to check that season 1 and season 11 are not the same slug. So I'll go ahead and do self.season1 and self.season11. And we'll go ahead and come in here and define test season slug unique. And we'll go ahead and say self.assert not equal. And that's going to be self.season1. And I think I did underscore. Yep, season underscore 1 dot slug and self dot season 11 dot slug. Not equal. Great. I did add another season, so let's go ahead and make sure we upgrade that count. I might need to add yet another item in here for the counts are concerned, and sure enough I do. Test TV shows, draft case. Let's just update that one to 4. And we run it again. And yet another one. This one should be 5. And there we go. Cool. So now it's actually testing that uniqueness on the individual season. Great. We also probably want to test the movie slug uniqueness. So inside of test movies, we're going to go ahead and do something very similar. So let's go ahead and make a couple other movies. So we've got title being movie title. So movie title A, dupe. Cool. So now inside of testing slug field, it will be testing movie slug uniqueness, and this is going to be movie A dupe and movie A. Okay, so I probably am going to have invalid numbers again because I added additional creations, which we can just update here. And again, this doesn't matter if it's in draft or not. Cool. So it is working for both kinds, right? So the main playlist as well as the sub playlists itself. And it's also checking that it is slugifying the titles and all that in a way that makes sense. So the test movie slug unique is there. Test slug field. Well, in this case, it's testing the very first one. It's not testing the duplicate one at all, right? So it is slugifying that original title. So if we did want to change this to being our original or our new generate slug instance, we probably could do that, but I don't think it's necessary at this point because if there's not an already existing slug, it will just go off of that default. In other words, that test is still fine. It still works. Okay, so that's actually generating unique slugs. This can help us alleviate a lot of headaches in the future, even if it created a few more for you in the short term.